Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to UCIT Town Hall, September 2017. We are coming to you live via Zoom for the first time. We're still in Oakland. We're here in a conference room set up for our Zoom presentation today, and we've got some fantastic speakers for you today. Well, before we get going and I talk through the agenda, I wanted to do a couple of housekeeping rules using Zoom for the first time. Live television, so God only knows what's going to happen over the course of today. But first thing I want you to all know is that you are all muted, just to kind of keep the background noise to a minimum. You will be able to ask questions to each of the speakers today. To ask a question, you need to send it to Yvonne Tevis through Zoom. She'll collect it here in the room and be able to then pass it along to the speaker. So just remember, Yvonne Tevis is where you have to send the questions. Don't send it to me. She's also set up as a co-host for the meeting today. The session is being recorded, including the presentation material. So if you have colleagues who are not able to join us here at the 10 o'clock hour, they'll be able to watch it available on demand. So it should be good. We're looking forward. We're actually excited that we're able to use Zoom for the first time for this, and let's see how it goes. If you're looking at the slide up on the screen, that actually comes from this year's UCCSC event in San Diego. You might see a couple of your colleagues that recognize them on the screen there. And we're going to, Richard got not able to advance the, there we go, okay. So, all right, so agenda for today, just a couple minutes for me starting off, then we're going to turn it over to Matt Halls, Santa Barbara's CIO, who is also the ITLC chair for this year, who wants to talk to you about what the CIOs have been talking about. And then we're going to hear from Christine Kirkpatrick from San Diego Supercomputing Center and some of the innovation that's happening through SDSC around big data. She's got a really exciting program that she's been leading, and we wanted to share that with the broader community, including getting people thinking about how to take advantage of some of the wonderful things that she and the team have set up there. Okay, so just some quick news. I want to do a shout out to our colleagues at San Diego who hosted UCCSC this year. Fantastic program. For those of you who attended, I think you'd agree it was one of the best we've ever had. It certainly was the largest that we've ever had. Greater than 600 people got there. They've now posted many videos from the event, a lot of the speakers, some of the general sessions at the link that you have here within the slide. Really encourage you to go look at it. I think it was fantastic, and really kudos out to the committee, the planning committee, and all the volunteers who made the event so wonderful for all of us. So thank you so much. You set a high bar for Davis to follow this coming year. Again, why do we do these town halls? I always like to remind people we do these because we are a really large system. When you talk about our 10 campuses, our 5 health systems, a variety of research institutes and centers, we have a lot going on, and we're creating a lot of positive impact across the universities, whether it be for our students, for our faculty, for ourselves. And this is one of the only ways that we can kind of reach people, and we just do it a couple times a year, and we try to tell great stories about what's going on. I always like to build the stories around 3 common themes that we're trying to move the needle on: leadership, innovation, and collaboration. And the speakers are going to talk to leadership and innovation. I'm going to speak for just a moment about collaboration. And it's about why it's important that we invest and continue to build this community, whether it be around the blog, around our use of Slack. It's because we are doing lots of things, and there's something in this community for everyone. From the mundane in terms of I'm struggling with this problem and I have colleagues on other campuses and in other health systems who are struggling with the same thing, to new ideas for breakthroughs and in innovation. There's something out there. And what I find when I talk to people, because I travel across the system, and I've had the opportunity to sit down in small groups with many of you, to speak at your local town halls or your summer events, is people talk to me about how much the community has meant to them and how they've been able to extract value for themselves personally and professionally by being able to connect with others who are like them from across the University of California. So building this community has been a priority for us as the IT Leadership Council. I think it's a priority for all managers throughout the organization who've seen how their teams have benefited from it. And for your colleagues who may not be participating as much, please always encourage them to engage and get involved, no matter how small or how big their involvement. Okay. So now we're going to go on to presenters. So we bring up our first speaker. As we bring up the slides, I'd like to introduce Matt Hall. He's a CIO at Santa Barbara who's been with us now for coming up on 2 years. I've been gotten to know Matt really well, both when he was interviewing, but then also watch the transformation that he's helping happen at the Santa Barbara campus. And he accepted an assignment that sometimes can be a tough sell in the system here, which is to, in addition to the day job, help coordinate and corral the CIOs in our IT Leadership Council. Matt was really willing to step up and play that role this year. And we really want our chairs to be able to talk to the broader community about what the ITLC is talking about when we get together, what we're focusing on, and how we're trying to enable you all to do the best job you can for the mission. So I'm going to turn it over to Matt to talk about priorities for 2017-18.
Thanks, Tom. Good morning. I'm going to make sure I get the clicker right here. I think we've got it. As Tom said, I'm the CIO of Santa Barbara and the ITLC chair for this year. And it's just opening statement. It is exciting to be a part of a system. It's exciting to be a part of the University of California. This is a rare thing that we all have access to. So I hope you're feeling as honored as I am to be here, a part of this system, because it's fun. I've had the opportunity to work in public sector and private sector. And my most recent university experience came from Vanderbilt University, which is a private academic medical center. And there's a lot of benefits to that. But we really do have a unique thing that Tom points out, is that we have the ability to collaborate across many different regions in California. And we are the most revered higher educational institution and system in the world today. So let's remember where we come from and where we are. It's an exciting time to be here. But I have to say one thing. There's someone in this audience, her name is Alexa. And I hope someone out there that triggered your keyword, because she does not even have an Echo Dot in her house right now. So we're going to make sure we hook that up for her at some point. So let's talk about our True North activities. The CIOs basically have a prioritization set that Joe Bangford ported to us last year from UCSF. And an idea is to get the institutions across the University of California either loosely or tightly coupled in their coordination. You can see some of the key points there: the people, financial sustainability, education, research, public service, and risk management. In 2017, I surveyed the CIOs. So Christine was asking me earlier what the cadence was. And as we start to move chairs, the chairs pivot from the vice chair to the chair in June, July of each year. So what I wanted to do as a preamble to me assuming the chair of the ITLC was, what's on the minds of our CIO community? So I surveyed them, and 10 CIOs responded to that survey. And I just want to place a caveat, because just because we ordered things doesn't mean one thing is less important. It's just we have to only attend to a few things at a time, because I can tell you, when you get 10 to 20 CIOs and their deputies in a room, there's a lot of varied attention. And the first thing I want to tell you is that information security is always a priority. This is kind of a given. So whenever you see InfoSec and all the information security and CISO community love to see this, InfoSec is always a priority. It'll always be the top of the list, especially in light of public sentiment and just what happened with Equifax as an example. That's the caveat I'll keep making throughout the presentation. What we did is we looked at EDUCAUSE priorities. To start off, there's 3 different sets of priorities I looked at. And I encourage you to go search for EDUCAUSE CIO priorities 2017. And you can see that on the left there, it's InfoSec, sustainable funding, sustainable staffing, data-informed decision-making, strategic leadership. This is where we are at the table with the leadership in our various universities, data management and the large-scale data activities Christine will talk about, affordability, student success, and then a couple other things that fell at the lower end of the spectrum. So what we really found were the 2 most important things to CIOs, and this is probably a pretty similar set of responses you'll see, as sustainable funding and people are always at the top of the list as well. But it's particularly important when I get a little bit further in the presentation, you'll see our investment profile, while people are still the most important part of our infrastructure inside of the University of California. So we have categories for True North that I mentioned. Again, top of the curve, sustainable funding and people. And sustainable funding is going to be incredibly important to us. We have a lot of funding pressures. We have affordability issues from our tuition. How do we maintain our operations and still sustain our funding models? How do we create new funding models? And how do we make sure that we don't allow IT investments to crowd out other critical research, educational, and student investments as we move along? Because IT expenses are continuing to accelerate. This is one of the key things when we talk about leveraging scale for value is we want to bend the curve down on our IT expense so we can invest in people and the mission. Again, information security, always a priority. So we did and I say that because, security is always at the top by far, but where we said the two biggest priorities for us this year outside of information security and risk management were data analytics and educational technology. We're actually starting a conversation on October 23rd and 24th where we're bringing Microsoft, Google, and Amazon to Oakland, and we're going to start talking about strategic use of the cloud. What does that look like for the University of California as a system? There's a lot of varied investments across the system, but how do we use that? And then how do we use it to support analytics and educational technology? So it'll be a good conversation. Let me back up. I flipped past one. All right, there we go. Because on 23rd and 24th, as we talk about that cloud discussion, all of our committee chairs are going to be there. Christine and others will be there to help recalibrate what our priorities are for the coming year. So we'll have a good conversation. The committees will debrief, and that allows us to coordinate across the CIO cohort across the University of California system. So that's our True North revisitation. But one of the topics that emerged from this is, and I'm highlighting the people side of this, is when I took over Santa Barbara in October 15th through August of 16, I did an assessment. I looked at the labor, I looked at all the expense drivers across the campus. And I particularly looked at the professionals by job function. What is it that we do? What type of job codes are there? And I'm using these more as a prop than an information source so we can talk to it. But the key thing here is they're sort of extracting some themes here. There's systems personnel, there are developers, there are analysts. ICs in my world, when it came most recently from Microsoft, individual contributors and coordinating labor. So coordinating labor could be project managers, supervisory managers. ICs are some personnel with a specific skill. So when I look at these three broad categories, we have people who are doing systems. This would be VMware. These would be any of our electronic plumbing activities, the network, information security. There's a lot of systems work that happens to keep the core technologies alive. The developers are doing the business systems. They're putting finger to keyboard to develop code, and the analysts are helping do the actual, what does this business process look like? How do we translate a requirement from English language into a specification to move into an agile or other development methodology? When I look at proportionally, we have at UCSB, and I'm not sure if this holds true across the system, but sentiment from our UCCSC dialogue on this topic seems to be that we have a lot of systems people. Developers are out there, but they come in second by quantity. And then there's an even lesser cohort of analysts. And that may not be true in your particular situation. It's true at UCSB. And over time, I want to see the calibration of, as we get better with our systems, we do things like email consolidation or VMware consolidation. It should free up more time for our IT personnel to work on the business processes of student success, data analytics, educational technology, and the mission. And that's how we're going to get leveraging scale for value to occur, is that we keep the staff count the same or flat, but we're able to reallocate people to new activities and some exciting activities that are going on. The other thing I want to do is say, as our coordinating labor pools have an attrition, we want to move more and more of those folks into individual contributor specialist roles so we can heighten the impact to the mission. The other thing I did is at UCSB, as I did a application sort of inventory. We started that in May of 2016. We finished it up, and then we continue to update it and look at it. And it's surprising. Even this last week, we had a debate. What is an application? And I said I couldn't define it, but I know it when I see it. Is Zoom an application? Well, we've got Richard and colleagues over here looking after Zoom. It takes a lot to make one of these video conferences pulled off effectively. It's an application. It's something that requires our attention. Is MATLAB an application? It's a piece of software. It takes software administration. But I wanted to point out is that I guess that oval rectangle-ish with a nice curved edges highlights, most of the applications at UCSB, these major applications, are custom application, and that implies something about our staffing requirements. Custom applications dominate our landscape, and that's very important and impactful to our labor profile. Because when we look at Santa Barbara, UCOP tells us that, and let me just back up just a second. We had Dwayne Duckett and his team pull all the information across the system when we started discussing our labor sustainability initiatives. And they pulled out the FTE counts and the associated salary and benefits expense with every campus across the system. And it shows from Dwayne and his cohort's information from UCOP, there were 322 FTEs in March of this year, $36 million in combined expense. You can see the salary expenditures and the benefit costs, 26 to 9.5 respectively at UCSB, according to UCOP. Now, we have a different view of that at UCSB. When I looked at we're not in career tracks yet at UCSB, so we have to do CNTs, is in a unique code that we have. We have all these other job codes that are technical job codes. But when we did all of those technical codes with all of the associated supporting labor, I came up with 400 FTEs running about $43 million in expense. And you'll see why that's important in a moment. Because when we look at the system right here, you'd see 7556, that top line, that grand total, 7556 for about $952 million in expense for all of the campuses. Now, Tom, I don't think this actually accounts for UC Health. This is just the campus component of the spend.
No, this does also.
Oh, it does include Health. So it does include UC Health. Tom's calibrating me on that. So that's a pretty significant spend. But remember the lesson from UCSB. They're showing 400 from my analysts, and UCOP showing 322. So what does that look like in the system if we're showing 75, 56, and 952? By inference, we have over 9,000 potential FTEs associated with the system's IT infrastructure and $1.138 billion in IT expense. So I can't validate that. That's an inference, but that's something that we can say there's considerable investment. I would argue that that's probably the most important investment that we're making. And ask yourselves, $1.138 billion, what could we buy with that? What are we buying with that? We're buying some extraordinary things. And we want to continue to preserve that investment profile. And one of the issues we have is where people live. So on the right side is the Santa Barbara locus. That's where we started to look at where are people distributed. So if your home address, all of you on this call are likely represented in this heat map. The larger bubbles show the larger geographical concentration of personnel. I had a theory about Santa Barbara, which was proven to be false. And we'll see some of the demographic information in a moment. I figured that since the median housing price was $1.1 million in Santa Barbara, that, you know what, if you're in Santa Barbara County, you probably have to go north or you have to go south to get a house. But unfortunately, I was wrong, or fortunate as the case may be. 71% of our IT staff actually lived in Santa Barbara County. And I think you'll see that when we do the age and demographic comparisons. The folks in the 80s and 90s who were in that zone, that 71%, purchased their houses at a time when they could afford it or relatively afford it. So the cost of housing is a concern, and that drives the proximity of personnel to the institution that employs them. So I just wanted to give you that heat map as a background to that. So the question is, in the University of California, living near the campus in which employs you, cost of living and home ownership. I see Christine's nodding over there. This is not a unique thing to Santa Barbara. It's not a unique thing to IT, but affordable housing is a critical issue. I've had people, this is a very recent experience. I've had people come from Colorado, and we try to warn them. We try to scare folks up front. It's very expensive to live here. You know it's expensive, and they nod politely. And then they get here. This individual came from Colorado. She set up her home, trying to get herself situated. One day she just got in the metaphorical station wagon and went back to Colorado because her and her husband couldn't live here. And, you know, the cost of hiring an employee, a cost of a bad hire, whether that's through because they left or because they didn't fit with the culture or couldn't perform their jobs. Our HR people gave me the number. At minimum, it cost the institution $12,500 on a bad hire. Tom's number is way north of that, up to, if we take the average salary across this UC, it could cost us up to $90,000. Well, let's split the difference and say it's $30,000. In your experience across the system, how many times have we lost a hire in probation period, or we lost them for other reasons where they couldn't stay? I think this is one of the big prohibitions that we're going to have in recruiting our labor and retaining the labor is cost of living and home ownership in the state of California. So in that spirit, remember, I'm going back to these people who in the 71% in Santa Barbara County, and again, your mileage may vary based upon your campus. We're looking at the people who are potential to retire. And again, these are props I want to speak to this point. Can someone retire, and will they retire? And it's an interesting perspective, because here's the age of the personnel that we examined in March. Looks like a bell curve. So 40 to 49 is our largest age category, and those divisions is MSP and PSS, so it's management and then the individual contributor roles. But if you look at people who are in their midstream from 30 to 59, that's the bulk of our employee base. These are people who probably have families, have a lifestyle that would love to have a house and have suburban living. And if they're new entrants into the workplace or they're transplants from somewhere else, they're not going to get in. But my data indicates that these folks are already entrenched, they have a home, and they're largely already established. Now that, again, mileage may vary. We're trying to understand this throughout the system. So again, by location, each of the systems, and I only put this up here when you look at the graphs, you can see there are some minor distribution differences in age. For example, the reddish number in the center indicates the 40 to 49 space. That's my zone right there. But it varies. You know, Merced is obviously going to have a different calibration than ANR or UCSB. But one of the things when we look at our employee base, there's a stages of life. Everyone has different needs. My kids are in college. I have a son at UCSB. I have a daughter who's at MTSU, and I have another son who's heading out to University of Washington, just finished his community college. My needs with those 3 adult children going to college are much, much different than someone who has a family. They have karate, soccer practice, ballet. You're playing home life Uber for the entire family. The 12-year-olds are different than the 20-year-olds. The newborns are different. So when we calibrate what's attractive to being a part of the University of California, this Zoom call is not just about the sake of having a Zoom call. Can we build the sociological and technical capabilities to have good, solid remote work? Can we work remotely? Can we do telework? Can we work from home? Can we work from remote centers? This is part of our practice to move in that direction, have this audiovisual capability, and have the capability to understand how to use these technologies effectively. And that takes some time because this is relatively new to us. So when we look at age and service credit, asking that question, will they retire? Can they retire? You're seeing a lot of people who have the ability to leave the organization, and fully 23% of our workforce right now, this very moment, has 16 years or more of service credit. They could probably walk off instead. So at this moment, I consider 20+% of the workforce eligible to move on and still have some form of pension and still have another career in front of them. So it's an interesting problem. And within a decade, that's going to go up to 35 to 40% of our workforce is eligible to retire. And again, it's not unique to information technology. This is across all of our labor activities, including our faculty. The issue here is that IT labor is very scarce, cost of living factors into the equation. So when you put those two together, it's very difficult to have sustainable recruitment. So again, service credit, retirement service by location. Your mileage may vary, but this is how it's distributed. I just want to pause a moment so you can look at that, look at your particular campus and see what it looks like. We're pausing, and we're moving. 25% less than 3 years of service credit. So you think about, what does that mean? Ask yourself, what does it mean as a UC employee with less than 3 years of service credit? Are we competitive with private sector labor markets? I see Christine off camera shaking her head this way. In Santa Barbara County, when we look at the whole market competitive environment, University of California at Santa Barbara is the labor market. So when someone says we're in parity with the labor market, I think we're looking in the mirror. So we have to look at this more expansively. We have to look at different forms of sort of cost of living indicators and say, are these wage rates in sync with the competitive market in which we live, both in California, nationally, in our location. So this is an eye chart, and the real thing I'd like to draw your attention to is the lower left-hand corner. I say all of these things, whether it's projects, application, hardware, software, et cetera, there are expense drivers associated with it. So the major expense drivers in our IT staff is our commercial real estate. And at UCSB, an IT person on average occupies 129 square foot of real estate. Now, we've had a surge in enrollment. So what do you suppose my EVC would like to see happen? He would like to free as much real estate as possible to put back into the academic mission. We have, if George were on the line, 95, 96 general purpose classrooms. I know our LSIT people manage another set of classrooms. GGSE, our Graduate School of Education, manages their classrooms. But there is a hunger for classrooms and learning space. So what if we can move half the workforce and make them eligible for telework, or move them to somewhere that's a very nice facility off campus? These are opportunities we have in front of us to free commercial real estate. Another major expense driver is professional development and training. The skills that we acquired, and I know some of you mainframe guys are out there. I did the same thing when I was a youngin'. I knew OS 390 and I knew what CICS and a Kixplex was. Those are not really germane to the world today and where we're heading. How do we recalibrate our skills? How do we take someone who's in a systems role, and if they're interested, move them to development or a business analyst? There's a lot of need for professional development and training, and that's an ongoing cost. Particularly transition labor from A to B is an expensive cost when you're doing career change. And then recruitment, salary, and benefits are other major expense drivers for our IT staff. That sort of sets the context for our conversation. And I said the conversation in leadership, but also the conversation amongst everyone on this call, and we'd ask you to put your ideas into this dialogue as well. What should we do? And framing that, we just did a little SWOT analysis, and I won't linger here too long before I turn it back over to Tom. You know, we have a constrained wage market. We have some political restrictions that we have to be careful that we're not giving too many perquisites that look profligate or, just wrong to the politically minded public in the event of the surge, in the event of higher education accessibility. Physical office space is much different than what you have in the private sector. We have threats from the private sector in terms of the wage rate that we were discussing and the benefits that they can offer and the perks. By the way, UC benefits are really fantastic. And the other benefits in terms of the strengths of this is we have a lot of locations in the state of California. We have an amazing reputation, and we have the ability to offer our employees a different work-life balance than most private sector firms. So we do have many attributes that bring to bear in terms of recruiting and retaining our people. And this is where I'd ask you to participate in the dialogue. You can do this on Slack. You can hit me, Tom, Ann Kowalczyk, Joe Bangford from San Francisco. Hit any of us up with your ideas, but we're looking at different ways. Can we enhance our student hiring? Can we work from multiple locations? Can we create shared service centers? Telework. This is why we're on Zoom right now. So have these ideas. If you have them, get involved in the dialogue. We want to hear from each and every one of you. Anything you have going on here would be very helpful. This is the sort of dialogue I wanted to give you an example of that we undertake in the ITLC. And at the end of the program today, Yvonne is going to open up for questions. And I think, Tom, that's it. It's over to you.
You can ask questions. You can ask questions now.
You can ask questions now?
Yeah, 2 minutes for questions.
We have 2 minutes for questions right now, according to Tom, and at the end of the program. So, Yvonne, do you have any questions coming on?
Not yet.
All right.
Well, let's recover the time so we have it.
All right, lovely. More time, and now it's something you really like.
All right, great. So, Matt, thank you so much. Again, the ITLC, we're working really hard to try to create strategies. I think Matt put it greatly, either tightly or loosely coupled together where we have common interests. And I think the more we sit down and talk, the more we recognize that we do have common challenges that we can talk about. How do we align ourselves for the future? Moving on to our next speaker, Christine Kirkpatrick from SDSC. I met Christine probably in my first 6 months in joining the university. When I got down and was doing my tours and got to visit SDSC and really get a sense of what it was and what it was doing. And one of the things that I've witnessed is that, it is an organization not so different from any of our campuses that is in its own transformation process of a set of services that it's been providing for decades, evolving to provide new types of services, identifying new types of customers that it could be supporting, new types of partnerships. And I've watched Christine play a major role in that evolution. And one of the things that I'm very passionate about, and I get with my background to engage quite a bit in, is the concept of, large data sets and how we use them to drive the research agenda, or how do we use them to drive innovation and entrepreneurship. And Christine has really been, as you can see from her first slide here, right in the middle of that. So I'm going to have her come up here and talk about her I Love Big Data bumper sticker. Christine, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Tom.
And there's for your slides.
Let me move this a little. Oh, okay, can you hear me okay? I don't have that great radio announcer voice that either Tom or Matt has, but I'm going to do my best. So let us know on Slack if you can't hear me. So hi, I'm Christine Kirkpatrick. I'm from the San Diego Supercomputer Center, and I am in that camp of people that have more than 16 years of service credit. I've been with the University of California system for the last 21 years on Saturday, not that I'm counting. And the last 5 of those have been spent at the San Diego Supercomputer Center. Also did a short stint doing a project here for Office of the President, but the rest of my time at UC San Diego. And at the Supercomputer Center, I'm head of IT, and I want to give a shout out to all the crew dialed in today and all the other people I recognize on the board here from campus. This is a pretty neat thing that our UC CIO does to engage, and we really are looking at all the faces of the brave people who have turned on their webcams, and appreciate your time this morning. So just for those of you who don't know what SDSC is, or who've just thought it was a place where people had a really inflated sense of self, we're super, we are sited on the UC San Diego campus, but we were started in 1985 as part of General Atomics. We are your neighborhood supercomputing center. In '97, we joined the UC system, and we do serve the whole UC system. We are a world leader in data-intensive computing and data management, and of course, supercomputing, as the name belies. So this is a research computing then and now. So on the left, this is Larry Smart next to one of the first Crays. We love this model of Cray because it came with a couch. The last one that I know of that came with furniture. And there are many other great photos on the internet you can find of people just lounging next to the supercomputer. But Larry came to us about 10 years ago to start up Cal IT after he founded the Supercomputer Center in Urbana-Champaign, where I also hold an appointment. And you can see on the right here, 30 years later, we're still posing next to supercomputers. We've got this delegation of young entrepreneurs from Honduras who came with to us through the Von Liebig entrepreneurship program at UC San Diego. They have a data center product that they're developing, and they wanted to get the advice of Jeff Feliz and Todor Milkov, our data center manager and senior engineer. And just to give you an idea of the scale that we work at, as many of you know, the electronic plumbers keep 100 gig, multiple 100 gig connections going for our research network. In Honduras, they have 4 10 gig connections for the whole country. We have a 2 megawatt generator for our facility, and in Honduras, they told us the largest generator they have for the whole country is 5 megawatts. So because the supercomputer is a thing and a big thing, and the data center is a place that you can walk in and experience, it's the way many visitors experience SDSC. But research computing is a lot more than the big machine and the place that powers and cools it. It's everything a researcher needs from pre-award to implementation. Some resources and specialties are too difficult to provide alone at a campus level, and that's why SDSC has been a natural place to provide these capacities, as it follows the tradition that we were founded on, that not every university can afford these large computing resources. So we concentrate the hardware and the expertise in one area, and then build a regional and out to a national network of facilitators that help researchers locally. So research computing as a field was always synonymous with computationally intensive research, meaning research where a computer was needed. Of course, the supercomputers predate useful desktop computers, which is probably hard for some of you dialed in to think about, but it's true, right? I started also in mainframe days, and I remember dual floppies, which could not run much. But with the advent of better computing, desktops and enterprise servers, analysis moves to supercomputers when it can't be supported by a regular computer for a variety of limitations, like if the data sets are too large or the job would just never finish. So around these large computational devices came other services, right? The need to store your data somewhere, including backups. Some of our customers, many of them, pay with grant funds, and so it's always been natural to provide help on the grant application. And where services don't exist and there's a computer science innovation, we're often co-investigators on grants. And there's other myriad of services too, your website, et cetera. The research computing of yore and today are similar. A lot of it is still about how are we going to get storage to be cheaper. But today we talk about how to get petabytes cheaper and how to partner with vendors so that our storage is denser, more energy efficient, longer lasting. What we've added on is the need to be conversant in cloud technologies, both locally hosted ones, commercial cloud, and then how to start local and scale commercial, or how to mirror services locally and in the cloud. And we've also created this new role, that of cloud broker, where we have people that keep track of all the different contracts among the different commercial providers, how to know, they know how to get free cycles. They know all the ways that researchers and grad students have accidentally racked up charges and how to protect against those scenarios. We've seen that some expertise can be bundled with cyber infrastructure to help researchers manage their data, including making it easier to discover later and prepare it for the curation pipeline and to make it easier to share. We also try and bake in intelligence and security for dealing with compliance data. SDSC has a whole division dedicated to Health CI. You might know our platform Sherlock, serving many projects within the system and national research projects. So suddenly research computing means partnering on important system-wide initiatives and moving up the stack to provide not just hardware and system administration, but working with data and computer scientists to embed their expertise into sophisticated platforms. SDSC has a UC external advisory board made up of faculty, administrators, and technologists throughout the system. Among their feedback when we first met with them a couple years ago was a unified voice to please bring us a data platform. So we came up with Awesome, which does somewhere in there equal something about social media. Don't ask me to tell you what it originally stood for. We just call it Awesome. So here's one initiative at SDSC that shows how we're working to provide resources to UC to enable broader collaborations. This effort is led by SDSC PI Amarnath Gupta. And if he looks familiar to some of you, you might have taken his courses already on Coursera. We have, SDSC has a big data specialization. And if you've taken it and you wonder where the strange Midwest, could it be Canadian accent comes from of mine, you're right, you did hear me on the graph analytics course. So Awesome was created with anchoring use cases where researchers use social media, sometimes in near real time, and it appeals to any kind of project with these pain points. And we, of course, won't read all of these, but, tons of data, tons of different types of data. The need for a project to continually ingest data, compute statistics, and then as it's ingesting new data, recompute the statistics, as well as a place for graduate students to have tools that they can access to work with this, the big data sets. So I'm just going to flash the architecture up just for a moment because my background is in enterprise architecture and I love these, but not to confuse you, you don't have to read all the boxes. The big thing I want to show you is this is not just a database and an API. This is several types of databases you can see along the bottom. Some invented at UC, like AsterixDB that comes out of Mike Carey's lab at UC Irvine. It's tuned for big data and real-time ingestion. And Spark, there in the middle, that came out of Mike Franklin's AMP lab at UC Berkeley. And UC really has a lot to be proud of when it comes to big data innovation, and SDSC showcases these technologies. Another one we've added in from UCI is Chenli's Cloudberry, part of the UI. We're also pioneers at SDSC in computer science areas, in this case pushing forward research on polystores, which is what you see there. Fancy way of saying lots of databases. So here's one of those use cases and some examples of the many different types of data that need to be organized in a way that researchers can put it together for analysis without having to be a data scientist. So everyone's talking a lot about machine learning and AI, and maybe you are totally dialed in and you know what that is, and maybe you really don't, and that's okay too. But to put simply, it's harnessing a platform to pour over your data and find patterns that a human might only stumble on accidentally. As our data sets and areas of inquiry have grown larger and more complex, we need these approaches because the old methods of reading records one by one would take too many lifetimes. And much of the research has time sensitivity, be it rapidly matching cancer patients with clinical trials, predicting which way a wildfire will burn, or detecting unfolding political risk, all topic areas that we work on at SDSC. SDSC is really honored to work with the UC San Diego China Lab that uses OSOM as an analytics layer. This is Molly Roberts, a UCSD political science faculty member who uses data-driven approaches to study censorship. We screen scrape a list of Chinese newspapers constantly, and then we go back and we check to see if those stories have changed. She'll compare the first story with the censored story and then look for patterns. So if you have a chance to hear her speak or read some of her papers, I'd really take it. I can't do her research justice, but I can give you one tidbit, which is one of the things that she's found is that censorship tends to occur if the story is of broad national interest versus local regional interest, and if it's related to political unrest, which makes sense. Another group we're honored to work with is the UC Institute for Predictive Technologies. It's a group of researchers where computer and data science research intersects to first order with an interest in predicting events or patterns, especially in the areas of public health and behavior. And we just met at UC Riverside yesterday. And that's Sean Young, who heads up the group from UCLA, Wei Wang from UCLA also, and Natasha Martin from UCSD. And apologies to anyone from UCR, that should be Vagelis squared. There are two Vagelises, both computer scientists from UCR, and I really apologize, I only have one of your last names in there. This group was formed in large part thanks to the support of the UC President's Office, who gave us a small amount of seed funding to form a research team spanning multiple UCs that would fund its work through grants, which we're doing. This is another place that we're using OSOM and SDSC Cloud. And let me describe just a few awesome stories, not trying to pun, just happens naturally with that platform name, that took place while we were refining the platform last year. Okay, so during the election last year, we collected tweets with specific election-related hashtags. So the team developed techniques for creating topic models, or in other words, we tried to detect in real time what was happening in the run-up to the election based on words that were clustering together a lot. So here we have one of our first detections showing Trump plus press plus credentials. You know, not all of the words like pray for Lil Wayne, I don't know what that has to do with this, but you get a sense from the clusters that something's going on, you use those keywords, and we saw this, we easily found a story that was 4 minutes old from CNN explaining the chatter was about Trump revoking press credentials for the Washington Post. And so we're starting to see that from all of this random noise on Twitter that you can actually detect events in real time. This other one underneath detected President Obama's plans to visit Orlando after the tragedy there, right? We see Orlando plus POTUS plus victims. So we are feeling pretty good about this system. We could handle the huge volume of tweets and our algorithms seem to be detecting events. And then our postdoc came back from lunch and he saw Trump plus ice plus cream. And this is 2016. So not being too political here, we just weren't primed for all of the surprising things that we might not be as surprised by this year. But he thought the algorithm was broken, but he quickly found some source tweets that said, hey, there's something going on. This is a real story. But we looked, we couldn't find any stories. Not at all. This really didn't make a lot of sense to us. And then a day later, the story hit about a Trump supporter in a Southern California ice cream parlor who had harassed two women in hijabs. And so we thought, okay, we've got something here that's, again, making sense of all the noise on Twitter. So aside from interesting stories, there's interesting data and computer science ground to break, looking at how entities are connected, how communities are defined, and how they change over time, including identifying the influencers in a network, have implications for many parts of science. And the NIH has funded our UCIPT team to work on prediction of HIV infection rates in the United States. You might not know this, but currently there's a 2-year lag between the time that infection rates are recorded and when health professionals hear about them from the CDC, and that's because they do a lot to make sure the data is very accurate and cleaned, and there's a lot of data collect. But our aim is to leverage big data techniques and social media analytics to see if within all that noise and garbage out there in Twitter, if there are indications to know sooner if we're losing the fight, say in specific regions. We also want public policymakers and health professionals to have more information to know if new policies and programs are helping or not, so that interventions can occur earlier. And this work is influenced by the research of Susan Little, Nadir Webel, and others at UC San Diego, who've studied not just using Twitter to detect these kind of patterns, but also to see if targeted interventions with people who've given their proper consent, of course, can that have an impact if you identify a big influencer in a network? How will that affect the rest of the community, or as a computer scientist would call it, the graph? So SDSC is a connector, not just in California, but in our region. So together with UC Berkeley and University of Washington, SDSC co-leads the West Big Data Innovation Hub, of which I'm the deputy director. We represent the 13 Western states from Montana to our UC President's home state of New Mexico, and then everything west, including Alaska and Hawaii. Our charge is to build partnerships across multiple sectors, from nonprofits, industry, government, and academia across multiple states in the region. And these partnerships should spur economic development in the big data ecosystem and chip away at big societal and scientific challenges. No pressure, right? Here you can see there's 3 other regions. Together we form a network of big data hubs. Sometimes we partner on initiatives. One example is the $3 million in Microsoft Azure credits that we've been given to help aid these partnerships. Another is a project under review at NSF called the Open Storage Network that, if funded, fingers crossed, will establish large network nodes at each of the hubs, and hopefully will branch out to individual institutions following the model that was used to bring 100 gig to campuses. They'd serve as focal points for providing data sharing and other services. And this is, again, at its heart, a research computing task, but something that's really, bringing something more powerful together. The hubs each have their unique thematic areas. Groups can receive spoke funding to spin up activities in these areas, and we just had a call September 19th that closed. We'll have another one next year. Hopefully slated for next year. I learned in NSF, you can't promise, right? You're not limited to these priority areas. The Wests are metro data science, precision medicine, managing natural hazards and resources, scientific discovery and learning, and then some cross-cutting areas such as big data technology. One of the West Hub's efforts has been to build up the community of practice around data storytelling. It's a skill needed alongside statistics and needed at all levels. Matt just did an excellent job with his data storytelling, from faculty to grad students to staff. Discoveries are important, but they go unnoticed if their significance can't be communicated to others. Here's an example of one of the West Spokes projects, the Metro Insight Spoke. It's headed by PI Rajesh Gupta of UC San Diego's Computer Science Department, who's also now the founding co-director of the new Halashioglu, I hope I said that right, sorry if I didn't, Tanner, Data Science Institute at UC San Diego, and SDSC's Chief Data Science Officer, Ilkay Altintash. Incidentally, she is the lead star of the SDSC Big Data specialization on Coursera, and she also has some data science courses on edX, all free. But their research centers on collecting, analyzing, and gaining insights that can benefit urban populations. And it also factors in workforce development and policy support. Their project brings together, there we go, energy supply, consumption, traffic, and weather data to detect and respond to situations in real time, be they traffic or natural disaster events like wildfires. So all of these are underpinned by research computing. I think everything I talked about almost is underpinned by SDSC Cloud, some local resources we have. And we're also using SDSC Cloud to build a data science app store and sharing framework. And you might ask yourself, that sounds like something that's been done. I've been pretty excited about this slide. I don't know if it's blowing up Zoom for you guys, or hopefully it's displaying okay. But the ecosystem for data science tools and sharing tools is very rich. But to use an analogy from the Research Data Alliance, it is a little bit still like the early internet. And again, maybe not everyone on the call can appreciate this, but I certainly do. I remember getting emails with an attachment and what a giant hassle it was. You've got to save the attachment, then find the application, then open it up. Nowadays, we just take for granted that you click the email and you click the attachment and something opens up. And it really is that simple. There's a ton of glue missing between all these different tools. The tools don't interoperate with other platforms, and there's a lot of missed opportunities because they don't work well together. Another important thing to take away from this analogy is that having multiple tools in one space is not a bad thing. For us really old people who remember the browser wars, we got better browsers, we got better security out of that. And so the same thing is true today with what we call the data net. So another project I'm involved in that I head up is the National Data Service. So this is a national initiative primarily for research data. And we partner in Benchmark along with other international groups that are providing the same things. The EU and Australia are further along. They have really large commitments from their government, but we hope that we will push the needle a bit on this over the coming year. We concentrate in 3 areas. Of course, interoperability, as I just kind of went over why it's so needed, but also given our background in doing bleeding edge scale, we of course do that in a large scale context. We're also a place that you can incubate your data projects. And then we've also found an interesting niche is a training platform for anything from courses to weekend hackathons. The NDS has a consortium that's built of prominent science communities, a lot of places you've heard of, advanced computing centers, and you'll see there, if you're really good with your acronyms, you'll see all the other supercomputer centers there. So one of our flagship things that we've produced is the NDS Labs Workbench, which you can see on our website. All the code is on GitHub. We can give you a demo account if you're interested. We've been at it for not quite 2 years, and we follow the data lifecycle and trying to make sure that we have the right kind of tools available. It's all open source, it's all open standards. And this is a quick screenshot. Basically, you just log into a web page and you can see a list of, this is our data science app store, data management app store. So here, someone searched on repository. Say that you want to try out Dataverse, or you're trying to build something on top of Dataverse, you just click add and then launch, and then it's been Dockerized and launches on a VM in the cloud. And if you're not really sure what that means, or everyone always talks about it, but you're not really sure what that means, it's okay, because the point of NDS Labs Workbench is so that you don't have to know what that means. You've come to do something with data. You don't need to know and spend time on all these other things that we can automate. So here's a couple examples of how we're using it. TerraRef is a big project that has a couple of grow fields. I know in California that probably is the wrong way to say that, but they're studying how plants grow. And it's a great IoT project where everything is censored, and they track with cameras that are constantly scanning the field for how things are growing based on everything you could think about, with soil, with irrigation, with sun, with canopy, angle of leaves and things like that. And they produce tons of data, more data than these types of researchers are really used to working with. And so what they did is they, rather than waiting to the end of the project and then reporting out what they found, they've quickly, early in the project, made their data available to researchers in that space. We made a custom catalog with just the tools that those types of researchers might want to do inquiry and analysis on that data. And then aside from it just being available to those researchers as a training tool in their workshops, you're not spending the first hour of the workshop saying, do I need VirtualBox or do I not have the permissions right? You just go to the website, log in, and you're ready to go. Another pilot that we just finished was with University of Washington, where they have a really renowned information school. And we worked with Carol Palmer and other faculty members there to bring data curation tools to the iSchool so that our future data curationists have a chance to work hands-on with these different tools, have options to do their projects in these different tools without a lot of other overhead. And then last but not least, we spent part of the summer working on this custom catalog for geoscientists. So the NSF has this big project called EarthCube, and part of what it's funded has been pieces of software that do different things. Like one of my favorite, it's not even just for geoscientists, is SWAB. It comes from Ilya Zaslavsky at SDSC, and it's wonderful for exploring any kind of survey data. So what we've done is we've taken all these little discrete pieces of software that the NSF has funded, and we figured out, okay, this one needs Mongo, this one has a message bus. These are all the funny, quirky things that you need to put in and bake into that Docker container, and now it's available. We also spend a lot of time trying to think about how to promote reproducibility, especially in the areas of not just having the traditional publication, but making sure that there's a place for your data and analysis to live alongside both of those. And so let me skip ahead, because I know time is short, and just show you what it looks like. So this is our proof of concept, Data DNS, which is a collection of services. You can see for any data set, you can traverse the directory structure, the container, see the publications associated with it, and that little thing, Launch Notebook, could launch RStudio or a Jupyter Notebook. Shout out to another UC great technology. And you can rerun the analysis. The data's already mapped. You've got access to compute resources. And say you find something new, you can contribute that analysis back in. This is really important because these data sets that are listed here range from between 70 terabytes to 200 terabytes. So it's not like you're just going to download that and come back 6 weeks later and then check it out. So thank you for the chance to tell you about these initiatives. I've got a closing quote here that came out from a recent article that really, I think, grounds what we're trying to do in research computing and data management, which is to make the fruits of research and scholarship better and available to all who need or want them. Back to you, Tom.
Hey, Christine, thank you. I know that I always enjoy listening to Christine's presentations. I always learn something new. I always learn about a new part of the university that I've never been exposed to before, because she's connecting so many different dots and groups. And I've never heard of the Institute of Predictive Technologies, but we're going to be talking about that after the town hall closes. Okay, did we get any questions for Christine?
We don't yet have questions for Christine. We have some for Matt.
Okay, we have some for Matt, and we have like 1 minute left. So let me, you want to read us a question and we'll.
Sure.
Okay.
So the first one is, can campus IT staff access the data that sourced Matt's slides?
I believe we can sort that out. Let me talk to Dwayne. I'm down here. There I am. Hi. Yeah, we can do that. And at least we can give this aggregated presentation information if you're going to make these presentations available afterwards.
I think yes. I think I'm going to push everyone to Slack.
Okay.
Right. So since we're out of time, I know Christine and Matt especially are very, very active on Slack, and you can find them there. We would like to push your questions there just so we don't keep people past the top of the hour. Just as a closing mark, right? We do this for you. We do these town halls because we think it's important. We think it creates connections. It spreads ideas. It gives people the ability to start conversations that we never quite know what they'll lead to, but it usually leads to good stuff. This is about our community. If you were at UCCSC or if you've been following the communications we've been putting out, we've put out a new portal, which is kind of a aggregation place of a lot of different things. It's a connect point into the blog. It's a connect point into Slack. If you're not connected into Slack in the portal and the blog, get connected. If you have colleagues around you that you work with who aren't, invite them. We'd love to have them a part of this. Slack is now above 2,600. I thought we were doing good, above 30%. Matt just changed the denominator from 7,500 to 9,000, so I can't say we're above 30% anymore. Christine, that's my statistics contribution for the day, okay? So it just shows you that we're only scratching the surface of what our community it might be able to do together, right? So please help us connect our colleagues in so that we can do more together. And I always close with the same last three statements. I'm so proud, much like Matt said, I'm amazed by what this system does every day. I'm amazed by the job that everyone does. And so I like to always close with the same three statements. Great job. We appreciate so much of what you do. Thank you for all that you do and the effort that you put in. And let's do more for our students, our faculties, and for ourselves. Thank you. Thanks for joining in today, and we'll see you next quarter.